Welcome to Strategy Shift podcast, where we talk about strategy in business, product, marketing, sales, and more. Today's topic is the Pareto Principle. A long time ago, in 1941 to be precise, an American engineer, Joseph M. Juran, discovered the works of an Italian polymath, Wilfredo Pareto. While going through the writings of Signore Pareto, Juran came across an interesting statistic. 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. Pareto was by trade an economist, and he studied the relationship between the wealth and the population. After discovering this 80-20 correlation, he decided to conduct his research into other places and countries. To his surprise, the relationship held in other places. It wasn't exactly 80-20, but as close to it as makes no difference. Thanks to Joseph Juran, this concept became a household name in engineering circles at first and other disciplines later. Thus, the 80-20 rule was born, also known as the Pareto Principle. The general description of the principle is this. For many outcomes, roughly 80% of the consequences come from 20% of the causes. It is important to point out, though, that 80-20 is not a hard number. In many instances, the relationship between these two numbers differs. Sometimes it's 90-10, sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's 95-5. On average, though, for our shared understanding, 80-20 has become a label to denote this principle. Interesting note, in mathematics, this rule closely follows the power law that describes the relationship between two quantities of something. But that's for a different day. Here are some other places that 80-20 applies. Fundraising. Fundraising for a good cause is a noble pursuit. Yet getting others to contribute can be a difficult task. There are many different areas to fundraising: collecting money, asking people to volunteer, looking for corporate sponsors, etc. All of these tasks and results generally follow the 80-20 rule. Research shows that about 80% of funding comes from 20% of the donors. 80% of the volunteer hours comes from about 20% of the volunteers. We all know that one person always comes to the events, the functions, that always helps out, and is always ever present for a particular cause or a group. Another example is that 80% of corporate sponsorships come from about 20% of the business relationships. In conclusion, about 80% of the results in the fundraising space come from 20% of the fundraisers' tasks. Business. Another area where the Pareto Principle applies quite often is business, but not everything in business follows the 80-20 split. In business, the numbers are much messier. For example, the advertising spend versus the number of clicks you get follows the Pareto Principle, but the numbers differ. We once ran a 12-ad campaign to determine what type of lead magnet would be the most interesting to our audience. Out of about 322 clicks, one ad accounted for about 32% of the clicks. The other 11 ads accounted for 68%. One ad was clearly generating the most interest and at a higher click-through rate. Here, the Pareto Principle was at work. This one ad would likely generate the most signups for a lead magnet, so we decided to use it. The Pareto Principle is also visible in the clients you have. If you tallied up the revenue from about 10% of your top clients, you'd be surprised how much they contribute to your bottom line. In comparison, the rest of your client's contribution would be almost negligible. If you then did a reverse and figured out how much time you spend servicing the top 10% of the clients versus the bottom 90%, you'd realize that you spend most of your time servicing the clients that bring you the least amount of revenue. Many businesses have used this insight to prune their client list and redouble and refocus their servicing efforts on their top revenue clients. This has tremendously increased their yearly revenue and profit. Daily tasks are not made equal. Whether you're putting together a report or talking to a prospective client, the value you get out of each of these tasks differs. The Pareto Principle is at work here as well. The value you get from the creating of a report depends on the report, as does the value of talking to a prospective client. If the report that you're putting together will be used to develop a strategy to help your business expand into a very profitable niche, then this small amount of effort could potentially lead to an oversized return. The Pareto Principle at work: 20% of effort creates 80% of value. Actually, probably like 5% or maybe even less, 1% of effort creates 99% of value in this particular example. On the other hand, the majority of the reports that we work on, are usually serve as time fillers, for a job. Talking to prospects is important, but what is more important is talking to the right prospects. For example, let's say John is talking to somebody who wants to buy his garage system. This might seem like the right person to spend time with for John, except this person can't afford the system and he only wants a quick $100 solution. This makes John's effort a futile one. To extract more value out of this call, John must find a better prospect that fits his business and price range. At work, the Pareto Principle is an ever-present truth. We must look for tasks that take time and effort but bring little value and eliminate them. Conversely, tasks that take little effort but generate the most value should be prioritized and done first. The first step to do that is to understand the value of your work and measure our results. Using the Pareto Principle is the secret weapon that can help you with this. The 80-20 principle is important to keep in mind, especially when you want to improve your business and your work. It's a great way to identify the most valuable work and where to focus your time and effort. It's also a great way to identify if you're spending too much time on something that isn't worth it. But it is also important to understand this principle is not always true, not always applicable. It often applies to activities that produce disproportionate results that might depend on personal skill level, market condition, technology, economy, etc. Sometimes you can spend a lot of time working on something and get a similar result as someone who only took half the time to do it. Sometimes there is a hidden unfair advantage that you don't have that skews the result in somebody else's favor. To take full advantage of the Pareto Principle, you must create a strategy shift in how you do your work, review your results, set up experiments, and make intelligent decisions about what creates value and what doesn't. Thank you for watching and listening to the Strategy Shift podcast. See you next time.